right, well, let's get into it because we've been doing every day our rankings by position for best Phillies all time. And we have no time restraints on this, which now we're realizing once we got to left field, we possibly could have because we already did our right fielders and our top center fielders in our previous shows. If you missed it, you can check it out on YouTube or on our podcast platforms. Today, we're going to get into top left fielders all time. Anybody that played with the Phillies, and we're looking primarily at their best years with the Phillies. Now, this was a tricky one because there's been a lot of left fielders that go back over 100 years, to clarify. And no, we didn't get to see all of them play in person, guys. And if you did, good for you. Congrats on living over 100 years.
Real quick, I forgot. Gene Segura's making $10.5 million this year from the Guardians, hypothetical man says.
Yeah, like, what do you need to rush for to a team? You're good.
Damn. Good for you, Gene.
You're getting paid to just live your best life. It's a win-win. Where do I sign up for a deal
third
like
highest
that?
paid player. Good for you, Gene.
That's insane.
Get that bag.
Love that.
Anyway, back to the left fielder. Sorry.
Yeah. No. All good. So this was a tricky one because of the fact that there's such a wide span of players, and there were a number of guys we could have included.
All right, I'm going to, as the guy that's currently rewatching Ken Burns baseball, I'm going to be the ageist that says it. Pre-1900 baseball was a different element than post-1900 baseball. I think it was around 1905 when like breaking balls started coming into the picture more. The elevation and speed happened. A lot changed at the turn of the century. So Ed Delahanty, I'm sorry, I'm going to be an ageist here, and I'm going to keep you out of the top three because I think 1887 baseball was a little bit different than the turn of the century baseball. I still think they were like club-ish at that point, where meaning like guys could sign up and try out, and it wasn't. I don't believe they had full contract. Like the contract situation also turned at the turn of the century. So like basically, I kind of put my foot down and said 1890s. We're gonna exclude you. Sorry.
Ed also didn't just play for the Phillies in Philadelphia. He played for the Philadelphia Quakers as well. Listen, it was a completely different time, as you're mentioning. When we were scrolling through the different names, you're talking, guys, this is before the merger and when you still had the Negro Leagues and Major League Baseball, before you had even World War I for some of these guys, you're going back into the world wars. You're going back into a lot of different things, the black and white pictures and everything. So a lot has changed.
Ed.
Sorry, Ed was, as you mentioned, his years 1888 to 89. Then he played for a decade from 91 to 1901. Was a two-time batting champion, Hall of Famer, and had a fantastic career, but
okay, and I just want to clarify also, it was the start of the dead ball era around the time one of our guys gets in. So there was very specific rule changes that also had a big impact on it, favoring pitchers. First, the size and width of home plate was changed from a 12-inch square base to a 5-sided figure measuring 17 inches. So the plate got bigger, and the strike zone also got much bigger. And secondly, foul balls began counting as strikes. So, like, turn of the century was, I don't want to say a different game, but, like, major changes. So, for that reason, we're ageist.
Yeah.
Sue me.
We get into our top left fielders, starting number 3 and working our way backwards. Greg Luzinski, third on the list, who played with the Phillies also for a decade, from 1970 to 1980, which did span 11 seasons with the Phillies, 1,630 games. His stat line, 281, 363, 478, and had just under 1,300 hits and 223 home runs. He had 253 doubles, 811 RBIs, and 618 runs, as well as 29 stolen bases. And then in terms of accolades, a 4-time All-Star, top 10 MVP finish for 4 consecutive seasons from 1975 to 1978. The Bull, he was known as, the original Big Piece.
It's 4 because it's 75, 76, 77, and 78.
Guys, you know what? I'm leaving. I said 4 the first time.
Yeah, trust your gut.
Mathematically, it's 3, but it's 4 seasons, 3 years.
Well, you know the
whatever.
way sports seasons
All
go.
right, so Luzinski, the Bull, Lord have mercy,
Great nickname.
had a stretch in that 4-year span from 75 to 78, which is why he was also in that MVP voting, where he ranked second in the big leagues in RBIs at 446, third in slugging percentage at 535, fourth in home runs at 129, eighth in doubles at 130, and ninth in on-base percentage at 386, and finished second to Joe Morgan for the NL MVP award in 75, and second again to George Foster back in 77. Number 3, Greg Luzinski.
Yeah, the Bull. He's a staple of Citizens Bank Park. He's the man. He was a boom or bust guy. He said later in his career he finally realized he had to stop being so selfish and start hitting towards the middle of the field and not just thinking like, I'm going to smash this ball out of the ballpark. He was just like a true meathead baseball player, and a great left fielder. And you probably could make the case. I think if you did a fan vote, I bet like if you were just polling fans walking the concourse at Citizens Bank Park, who's the best, he might win like the popular vote.
Yeah.
Because he's so beloved and he was a part of some great Phillies teams in the turnaround and he smashed dingers and chicks dig the long ball. So, Greg Luzinski, great player. Tyler?
Yeah, I think you're right. The popularity is significant on a guy like Greg Luzinski because he's still around the ballpark.
Great
He got
nickname.
Bulls barbecue. So not only was he a great ball player, but he's still around the organization. I think the popularity vote wins out there. So the guy that I was comping him with, trying to figure out who might be 3, it's him and Pat Burrell.
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
And when you look at just the overall comp between the two of them, Burrell played minimal more games. It's like less than 20 games more.
Yeah, that's nothing.
Burrell has about 30 more home runs, but Luzinski has about 130 more hits. Burrell's RBIs are about 16 greater, but Luzinski's batting average is about 30 points higher. The OBP goes to Burrell because he walked more, but the
butt thrust.
But the OPS is exactly the same at 852. Both guys helped win a World Series.
So the
both
deciding factor was stealing stolen bases?
Yeah, 100%.
Because they were both speedsters.
Yeah, right. Luzinski had 29. Burrell had 5.
5. That's great.
Both guys win a World Series in their final year with the team before
pretty
moving
cool.
on. Luzinski goes to the White Sox in 81. Burrell goes to Tampa in 2009. So it's really, really, really close between these two guys, right? Both were betting. We talked about they're not base runners, right? They have negative your base running numbers. They have negative
5 stolen bases.
They
How
both
did they
have
even get those?
They pass balls. I don't know. Gross negligence by the catcher. Both have negative defensive wars that are really bad over the course of their tenure. Pat Burrell's at a 9. Luzinski's at a negative 9. Luzinski's at a negative 15. These guys were both offensive players. You could probably flip a coin and decide between these two guys. Luzinski probably gets the nod with the higher average. If you want to go strictly off of home runs, Burrell has the 30 more home runs. So either way, I'm okay with either.
Yeah,
they're basically the same player.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I
they're
know
very
Sean
comparable.
Ortiz and Barbara Carroll in the chat, you guys were talking about Pat Burrell. Listen, Pat Burrell's one that we definitely toyed around with, and it was tough. We actually found ourselves having about 4 or 5 names that we had to put in 3 slots. And as you were mentioning, Dave, in the chat, a few of these guys were guys that were before our lifetime, including none other than our number 2 player on the list. Now, here, you want to talk about going back, and we should have capped it like we did Guess That Stance, Dave Dorr. Well, we're going to really take you back down into history, into the early 20th century, when none other than Sherwood Robert
look at that card.
Sherry McGee
Look at
was
that. That's
playing
beautiful.
for the Phillies. Now, he
What a
goes by
beast.
the nickname Sherry. His full name is Sherwood. I feel like that's important to know here. 11 years with the Phillies, where he played for 1,500 games. His splits, a 299, 371, 447. Also had just over 1,600 hits, 75 home runs, 337 doubles, 886 RBIs, 898 runs, 387 stolen bases
Sherry
in
had
1904
wheels.
to 1914. And in 1910, he led the NL in runs, RBI, batting average, OBP, slugging percentage. Listen,
Dave,
we
stop
cannot
with these
go
guys.
with the history of the game without giving, our credit to the guys that got things started back in the day. So Sherry McGee, who, if you really look, he had a 48.3 WAR with the Phillies, which is 16 points higher than any other left fielder in the modern era. Obviously, it was a completely different time, completely different world back in the early 1900s, but he does still rank among modern Phillies left fielders. He still ranks first in runs, doubles, triples, on-base percentage, and stolen bases, and second in hits, RBIs, and batting average, and fourth in home runs, and eighth in slugging percentage. He was hitting home runs at a time that home runs weren't even as popular. And the whole encyclopedia, guys, the Phillies Encyclopedia called him one of the superstars of the early part of the 20th century.
Yeah,
Sure.
he was the original sabermetric 5-tool player.
Yeah.
No lie. Saber.org, Tyler calls him a 5-tool player. And Barbara in the chat is right. His 1910 season dominated baseball.
So back in the day, were they 4-tool players? Since power didn't exist,
he was
it
the
didn't
first
matter.
5-tool player. Look, there's a drawing of the guy.
Right
It's
about
very
the
old.
Model T,
Just Google-
5-tool player.
Well,
like
Google
the
his
engine,
pictures.
the engine
There's
started,
real
and then
pictures.
people started 5-tool player. That's what we're talking
Yeah.
about. There's another tool.
Yeah, I mean, it was the start of the dead ball era, and this guy offensively dominated, which was pretty rare then because, as we just talked about, everything was in favor of the pitcher. Paying our respects to old Sherry McGee. How could you leave him off the top 3
People
list?
flew
Just look
by
at his
blimps.
pictures when you get a chance of him
Dave P.
batting
said.
in a cardigan.
And, if
Such a
Matt
difference.
Deckard, if we were doing 2-month runs of Phillies left fielder, I absolutely would have put Don Brown probably number 1. But unfortunately, we did careers, not 2-month windows.
Yeah,
But I'm
it
with
is-
you on that.
It is wild when you think about
Isaac Newton was researching gravity, Dave P. says.
Yeah, honestly, as we were researching these guys and looking up their stats and information, the history nerd in me was deep diving and curious of like what was life back during that time.
Have you ever watched Ken Burns of baseball? It is it's a little boring at times, but it's a great history time capsule on top of the baseball stuff.
Yeah.
It's definitely worth the viewing. It's pretty wild. Things were a lot different.
Some of the
then.
way that they measured velocity, my all-time favorite one is where they had a guy on a motorcycle drive at a speed to see if the pitch would match the motorcycle.
Yeah.
They did that, and they used to line up in like a chicken coop. They lined up wire,
gosh.
and it would pass through the wires. And whatever,
Jeez.
I don't remember exactly how it worked because I'm not good at math or science, but it would pass through the wires and they would.
They knew the electrical speed current.
But the
or
thing
something.
was, every time it would pass through a wire, it would technically slow down a little bit because it was making contact.
So they just start guessing.
So they were saying guys that were getting clocked, like Walter Johnson, for example, guys were getting clocked at 90, 91, like Walter Johnson was. They say Walter Johnson probably was throwing 96-ish, yeah. And so, he truly was, he was throwing hard for then, too.
Yeah.
But, he truly was a guy that would have continued to throw hard until, basically the mid-2000s.
Yeah.
Well,
and my old man algorithm now, I started watching a show the other night, The Men Who Built America, and it was all about Ford and Vanderbilt and all that stuff. So I did some real old man viewing recently on TV.
I love it. And I actually want to add to your old man viewing with some more fun facts of the progressive era of the early 1900s, because not only was that around the time, of course, that Theodore Roosevelt was president and, significant court cases and legal changes that were happening. Also during the progressive era in the early 1900s was a time that we saw Albert Einstein formulate the special theory of relativity.
Dave P. was not joking.
You were not. No, you're right. In 1905, Albert Einstein literally formulated the theory of relativity. We also saw the construction of the Panama Canal begin in 1904. Hawaii became a U.S. territory in 1900.
Wow.
The first Nobel Prizes were awarded in 1901.
Wow.
And the first electric air conditioning unit was invented in 1902.
Great
What
year.
a time.
Love air conditioning.
What a time. This makes, I love this stuff. I think history is so fascinating.
Yeah.
So we need to, we're going to become the history channel here. All right. Well, I'm glad, Sean, you've been enjoying watching those two and, taking a trip
my
down
Hulu
memory
algorithm
lane.
popped up, and I guess because I was watching Ken Burns, it popped up, and I was like, yeah, all right, that sounds cool. And I watched them. They're pretty good.
Yes. Well, our number one guy who was playing with the Phillies shortly after World War II, if we want to continue to connect history to their careers, Del Ennis, number one. This may be a surprise to many of you if you had no idea it was going to be Del at number one. Played with the Phillies from 1946 to 56, and in his 11 years, played exactly 1,630 games. His splits 286, 344, 479 with 1812 hits, 259 home runs, 310 doubles, 1,124 RBIs, 891 runs, 44 stolen bases, and is third in franchise in home runs behind none other than Mike Schmidt's 548 and Ryan Howard's 382. Del Ennis, who continues to hold records. His number was finally retired. Jersey number 14 was finally retired at one point.
Because Jim Bunning wore it.